When the American empire starts to lose its grip, its allies quickly become targets. Canada, once a trusted partner of Washington, is now seen as a rival. At the heart of this new confrontation lies an unexpected proposal, not from Washington, but from Beijing. While the United States threatens to dismantle Canada's automotive sector, China extends an enticing hand. Abolish trade tariffs and open new markets in exchange for economic independence. Ottawa now faces a choice that could reshape the century. It all began with a statement that sounded more like an ultimatum than a diplomatic remark. The U.S. Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, publicly declared that, for America, the domestic car industry would always come first. No ambiguity, no diplomacy, just a red line meant to remind Canada of its place within North America's economic hierarchy. For decades, the assembly lines of Windsor, Ottawa, and the D3 region have formed a tightly interwoven industrial network. But today, Washington appears ready to tear that fabric apart. According to several attendees at a closed conference in Toronto, Lutnick even suggested that Canadian production should be moved southward, a polite way of saying, your factories, your jobs, your future, we want them. Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, confirmed hearing the full speech. To him, it wasn't a slip of the tongue, but an official statement approved by Donald Trump himself. When the Commerce Secretary talks about relocating our production lines, it's not an isolated idea, it's a strategic warning, he summarized. And while that thunderous message echoed from Washington, another, very different one arrived in Ottawa. China's ambassador delivered a proposal that left diplomats stunned. Beijing was ready to lift its heavy tariffs on Canadian canola on one condition, that Ottawa remove its 100% duties on Chinese electric vehicles. Two messages, two worlds. One threatens, the other entices. Yet both target the same nation, Canada. For months, Ottawa has obediently followed America's lead. Under the banner of transatlantic solidarity and the defense of economic democracy, the Canadian government has repeatedly demonstrated loyalty to Washington. All this unfolded without any real national debate, as though America's interests naturally equaled Canadians. Policies were copied, sometimes word for word. 100% duties on Chinese vehicles, restrictions on Asian-made electronic components, and limits on lithium battery imports from Korea and Japan. This imitation was born not from rational economic strategy, but from a deeply rooted political reflex in Ottawa, to follow in order to exist. For decades, whenever Washington raised its voice, Canada aligned itself in the name of unity and continental security. What was once a calculated strategy has turned into a paralyzing habit. Blind loyalty, however, comes at a steep cost. Hastily imposed tariffs have disrupted supply chains, raised energy prices, and weakened thousands of small and medium-sized businesses. Asian car parts now sit stranded in Vancouver's ports. Assembly lines in Ottawa have slowed down, and Canadian consumers are discovering that loyalty to Washington comes with a price tag. Cars that cost 20 to 30% more. Howard Lutnick left no room for misunderstanding. Canada is not a partner, it's a competitor. His harsh words, delivered with the tone of a man not seeking persuasion but submission, made one thing clear. For Trump and his circle, Canada is no longer an extension of the American market, but a territory to be reabsorbed. Behind the Buy American rhetoric lies a methodical plan to reclaim jobs, rebuild manufacturing chains, and restore northern dependence on the southern powerhouse.
Even the quieter voices in politics, those rarely heard amid the daily noise, have begun to sound the alarm. Former NDP leader Tom Mulcair put it bluntly, Canada didn't create this problem, it copied it. That remark, which quickly went viral, perfectly summed up the core mistake. Ottawa had chosen loyalty over judgment. By mechanically following Trump's trade strategy, the country had built its own trap. Western farmers are paying the price. Consumers are facing soaring costs, and automakers are watching their market share gradually erode. Canola producers, once a proud symbol of Canadian agricultural success, have become the first casualties of this imported trade war. Shipments once bound for China, Malaysia, and India now sit idle in silos. Tons of golden harvests lie dormant across the prairies as prices collapse and debt piles up. In Brandon, one farmer told CBC, "We're no longer entrepreneurs, we're hostages of American politics." While the fields fall silent, so do the factories. In Ontario, several assembly plants have suspended production due to missing parts from Asia. In Quebec, small electronics manufacturers are laying off staff. In Windsor, people are already talking about a lost decade for the car industry. The economic ripple extends far beyond manufacturing, reaching transportation, logistics, and even household spending. In this climate of suffocation, Beijing decided to step in. Not through confrontation, but through proposal. The ambassador's message was no diplomatic coincidence. It was part of a broader plan to reposition China, not as a distant rival, but as a credible economic alternative. By offering Canada renewed access to the Chinese market for its canola, in exchange for lower tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, Beijing wasn't making a charitable gesture, it was making a strategic calculation. It was an exchange built on balance. Canadian farmers would regain lost outlets, while Chinese automakers would gain entry into a North American market where demand for affordable clean cars is exploding. If accepted, China's offer would mark a historic turning point. Canola, the backbone of prairie agriculture, would once again compete on Asian markets, currently dominated by Australia. Producers in Saskatchewan and Manitoba would finally catch their breath, free from sanctions. In return, Chinese car makers like BYD, NIO, Geely, and Chang'an could bring to Canada a new generation of electric vehicles priced between $30,000 and $40,000 Canadian dollars, prices that Ford or GM can hardly match. For Washington, such a move would feel like betrayal. For Ottawa, it could be rebirth. Behind America's protectionist rhetoric lies a deeper truth: fear. Fear of losing control over technology. Fear of fragmented supply chains. Above all, fear that China might prove it can produce better and cheaper. Trump, Lutnick, and the U.S. industrial elite know this well. Cars from BYD, NIO, and Geely are no longer mere curiosities from Asia. They have become the emblems of a new industrial revolution. Longer-lasting batteries, halved production costs, and advanced autonomous systems. Everything the U.S. claims to dominate, China already manufactures and oftentimes does it better. Caught between fear and pragmatism, Canada stands at the crossroads. Should it keep imitating a superpower that now treats it as a pawn? Or will it finally chart its own course, even at the risk of angering Washington? The decision is no longer technical, it's historic. Yet Ottawa still follows the American script. A year before Trump's re-election, Canada had already signed a secret accord aligning its tariffs with those of the U.S., a political choice with no sound economic logic. The outcome? No real benefits, no preferential access to the U.S. market, no promised factories, no guarantees for aluminum or steel, nothing. Worse still, Canada now faces the same sanctions it once helped justify. Lutnick's own words proved it: "We will reclaim what is ours, and what is yours if necessary." This is no longer an alliance, it's a planned absorption. While Washington brandishes threats, Beijing plays the card of reason. China's message, calm and pragmatic, seems crafted to appeal to a weary Canadian public tired of high prices and endless trade disputes. "Abandon ideological tariffs," says Beijing, "and we will reopen the gates to fair trade." The question facing Ottawa is no longer merely economic, it's one of identity. Can Canada continue to live in the shadow of a neighbor that treats it as a vassal? Or will it finally chart its own course, even at the risk of angering Washington? In the coming days, the government will have to decide whether it has the courage to accept China's bold but rational offer, one that could free canola, free cars, and perhaps even free Canada.
Trade tensions have now reached a breaking point. After years of following American directives, Ottawa is discovering the true cost of partnership, dependency. And when Washington raises its voice, an entire segment of the Canadian economy trembles. But this time, something is changing. Instead of reacting with fear, Canada has begun to listen to different voices. Voices reminding it that sovereignty is built, not begged for. Across the prairies, frustration among farmers is palpable. Their storage facilities are overflowing with unsold canola, Asian markets remain closed, and the promised subsidies never seem to arrive. "We're paying for a war that isn't ours," said one producer from Regina. As farmers count their losses, auto plants in Oshawa and Windsor are questioning whether they'll still exist 2 years from now. The Canadian industry, trapped between two global powers, is gasping for air. In this atmosphere of uncertainty, Ambassador Wang Di's remarks took on an entirely new meaning. Behind his measured tone was a genuine exit strategy. Remove your tariffs and we'll reopen our markets to Canadian canola. If this gesture were to materialize, it could inject more than $5 billion into the country's agricultural economy. With a single decree, thousands of farms could finally breathe again. Economists see this as a historic window, an opportunity for balanced trade where both sides could win without losing face. Yet the offer is not merely economic, it's profoundly political. For the first time in decades, Canada holds a real bargaining chip. By easing tensions with Beijing, Ottawa could demonstrate that it is capable of shaping a national strategy based on its own interests, not those of a dominant ally. Such a move would send a powerful signal to the world. Canada can engage with China without betraying its values or democracy. The potential impact extends far beyond canola. A reciprocal agreement could pave the way for broader cooperation. Green infrastructure, battery supply chains, and joint research in clean technologies. Canadian companies like Magna or Lion Electric could gain privileged access to the vast Asian market, while carefully regulated Chinese investors could help revive struggling industrial regions. In the prairies, people already speak of it as a breath of fresh air, a moral as well as economic restoration. After years of hardship caused by American trade wars, China now offers them a chance to recover. Some cooperatives in Saskatchewan are already drafting export scenarios, betting on a soon-to-reopen Chinese market. However, the prospect is making waves in Washington. Within the Department of Commerce, whispers grow louder. Canada, they say, is beginning to slip away. Strategists fear the country might finally break its silent pact of economic subordination. A confidential memo even warns of a potential structural realignment. In other words, if Ottawa moves closer to Beijing, the entire North American order could start to crack. For the White House, the continental economy rests on a simple premise. The United States decides and Canada follows. But that formula is starting to fail. More and more voices in Ottawa and Montreal are calling for an independent approach. Academics, former diplomats, and business leaders are demanding a national debate on economic sovereignty. They recall that Canada's strategic neutrality was once its greatest strength, allowing it to talk to Moscow during the Cold War while staying allied with Washington, and to trade with Cuba without triggering a crisis. So why not reclaim that spirit? Why not turn this crisis into a catalyst for innovation? Bold ideas are emerging, inviting Chinese EV manufacturers to build in Canada, but under strict conditions.
Local production, Canadian labor, full technology transfer, and full compliance with North American environmental standards. A hybrid model where Canada is no longer merely an importer, but a co-producer. Such an initiative could create thousands of skilled jobs, revive abandoned industrial zones, and reduce dependency on U.S. imports. This vision already appeals to several provinces tired of economic reliance on the South. Ontario sees a chance to modernize its manufacturing base, Quebec envisions new investments in the battery and aluminum sectors, and British Columbia imagines its ports integrated into a more balanced trans-Pacific trade corridor. Gradually, one word begins to echo in speeches: emancipation. At the same time, Canadian diplomats are quietly exploring a new cooperation format, a trilateral dialogue between Canada, China, and Europe dedicated to green mobility. Though still embryonic, the idea positions Canada as a bridge between economic blocs rather than a satellite of one. This audacity unsettles Washington, but inspires others. In Europe, observers watch closely to see if Canada can step out of America's shadow without breaking its alliance. In Asia, Ottawa's cautious balance between competitiveness and independence earns respect. Even in Africa, where China's economic influence grows, Canada's gesture would be seen as responsible openness, a sign that choosing a direction matters more than choosing a side. For too long, Canada believed loyalty to Washington equaled strength. Today, loyalty without benefit has become weakness. By lifting tariffs, Canada wouldn't betray its allies. It would simply affirm that its decisions must first serve its own citizens. Prairie farmers aren't waiting for slogans, they're waiting for markets. Auto workers don't need speeches, they need running factories. Taxpayers refuse to keep funding trade wars conceived elsewhere. Only one obstacle remains: political fear. Fear of provoking Trump's anger, of seeing a media storm, of seeing diplomatic channels erupt. But every era demands an act of courage. In 1988, Canada signed NAFTA. In 2025, it could write a new chapter, that of a mature nation ready to defend its interests without abandoning its values. Years from now, people may look back on this crisis not as a confrontation, but as the moment when Canada began to think for itself. Because sometimes it's not about choosing between two empires, it's about finally deciding to be a nation. So, what do you think about this situation? Is Canada really ready to break free from America's economic shadow, or will it stay loyal to Washington no matter the cost? And if you were in Canada's place, would you accept China's proposal or continue to follow the US path? Share your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective. Thank you so much for watching this video all the way to the end and for your attention and loyalty to the channel. Your support means a lot, and it's what keeps this community growing every single day. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. And of course, don't forget to drop a comment and let us know what you think. Your opinion truly matters here. Thanks again for being with us, and I'll see you very soon in another video, just like this one. Until next time, stay informed and stay curious.